Por favor, siéntate. Join us on a rigorous step-by-step journey to fluency. I'm Timothy, and this is LearnCraft Spanish. Today we'll learn the verb for sit in Spanish. The simple infinitive is sentar. But sentar doesn't mean to sit or to sit down. It actually means to seat, as in to give someone a seat. For example, I'm going to seat them here.
Los voy a sentar aquí.
So you'll use sentar when one person is seating another person. But for simply sitting down or seating oneself, you'll use sentarse, the pronominal version of this verb. So you'll pick a reflexive object to go with it. For example, I'm going to sit down here.
Me voy a sentar aquí.
The participle is sentado. So for example, have you seated them?
¿Las has sentado?
I haven't even sat down yet.
Ni siquiera me he sentado todavía.
Let's go ahead and get some practice with sentar and sentado. Remember to use a reflexive pronoun anytime someone is simply sitting or sitting down, meaning that they're seating themselves. But we'll also throw in some examples of sentar used with a direct object. I want to sit down.
Me quiero sentar. Me quiero sentar.
We have to seat the kids.
Tenemos que sentar a los chicos. Tenemos que sentar a los chicos.
Do you want to sit down? They have already sat down.
¿Te quieres sentar? Ellos ya se han sentado. ¿Te quieres sentar? Ellos ya se han sentado.
There are 11 boys, and we have seated them all.
Hay 11 chicos y los hemos sentado a todos. Hay 11 chicos y los hemos sentado a todos.
Why have you sat down? They feel that they need you.
¿Por qué te has sentado? Ellos sienten que te necesitan. ¿Por qué te has sentado? Ellos sienten que te necesitan.
Now let's learn the present tense forms of this verb. This verb has a stem change whenever the first syllable is stressed. So, for example, the word for he or she seats is not senta, but sienta. For example, she sits down and waits.
Se sienta y espera.
And here are some more examples using various present tense conjugations. They never sit here.
Nunca se sientan aquí.
Why do you sit down?
¿Por qué te sientas?
I sit down here now.
Me siento aquí ahora. Me siento aquí ahora.
Notice that this word, siento, looks and sounds exactly the same as the equivalent form of sentir, the word for I feel, siento. But from context, you can generally tell whether the speaker is saying I seat or I feel. Here's another example that uses both of these words. I'm sorry, I won't sit here.
Lo siento, no me siento aquí.
Of course, this is literally, I'm sorry, I don't sit here. But very often in Spanish, the present tense is used to indicate something that's about to happen in the future. Let's go ahead and get some practice with all the present tense forms of sentar. We sit down where they always sit down.
Nos sentamos donde ellos siempre se sientan. Nos sentamos donde ellos siempre se sientan.
He sits down first, so I always seat the little boy.
Él se sienta primero, así que yo siempre siento al niño. Él se sienta primero, así que yo siempre siento al niño.
Do you seat those 13 people in the other place?
¿Tú sientas a esas 13 personas en el otro lugar? ¿Tú sientas a esas 13 personas en el otro lugar?
Do you sit down where I sit down?
¿Te sientas donde yo me siento? ¿Te sientas donde yo me siento?
Now, there's an important difference between the verb for sitting in English versus sentarse in Spanish. Check out this English sentence. She is sitting over there. So, in English, we're saying is sitting, which seems to imply se está sentando. But in Spanish, the verb sentar doesn't refer to the state of sitting down for a length of time. It only refers to the action of first sitting down. So if the sentence were, she sits down over there, describing the action of first taking a seat, you would say, se sienta allí. But the sentence is instead, she is sitting over there. And in Spanish, here's how you say that.
Ella está sentada allí.
So this word, sentada, is an adjective that means seated or sitting down. It's related to the participle sentado, but it changes based on the number and gender of the noun it describes. Try it yourself in this next example. The boys are sitting at that table.
Los chicos están sentados en esa mesa. Los chicos están sentados en esa mesa.
All right, let's move on to the past tense. Since sitting down tends to be a one-time action, the preterite is common for this verb. All the preterite forms of sentar are conjugated exactly like the preterite forms of hablar. So, for example, they sat down together.
Se sentaron juntos.
Try it yourself with this next one. Did she sit down where I sat down?
Ella se sentó donde yo me senté. Ella se sentó donde yo me senté.
Let's do a mini quiz to practice all the preterite forms of sentar. In this quiz, I'm going to throw in a few examples that actually use the adjective sentado rather than the verb sentarse. So watch for that. You sat down where they sat down.
Te sentaste donde ellos se sentaron. Te sentaste donde ellos se sentaron.
The 15 girls were sitting at that table.
Las 15 chicas estaban sentadas en esa mesa. Las 15 chicas estaban sentadas en esa mesa.
We sat down where he was sitting.
Nos sentamos donde él estaba sentado. Nos sentamos donde él estaba sentado.
In this one, the person you're speaking to is feminine. Were you sitting there? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
¿Estabas sentada ahí? Lo siento, no te vi. ¿Estabas sentada ahí? Lo siento, no te vi.
He sat down far from where I sat down.
Se sentó lejos de donde yo me senté. Se sentó lejos de donde yo me senté.
The subjunctive forms of sentar are siente, sientes, sienten, and sentemos. It's kind of weird because siente is also a conjugation of sentir, meaning he or she feels. But it's usually pretty easy to tell from context whether siente is a form of sentir or is a subjunctive form of sentar. For example, check out this sentence. I want them to sit together.
Quiero que se sienten juntos.
So theoretically, this could be mistranslated as I want them to feel together, but that wouldn't really make any sense. Plus, since we have quiero que at the beginning, we know that the verb that follows it has to be subjunctive. So, quiero que se sienten juntos clearly means I want them to sit together. Let's practice the subjunctive forms of sentar. I want them to sit nearby.
Quiero que ellos se sienten cerca. Quiero que ellos se sienten cerca.
He wants me to sit with him to watch the movie.
Quiere que me siente con él para ver la película. Quiere que me siente con él para ver la película.
We want him to sit there and you to sit here.
Queremos que él se siente ahí y que tú te sientes aquí. Queremos que él se siente ahí y que tú te sientes aquí.
I understand that they are going to be here soon so that we sit together.
Entiendo que van a estar aquí pronto para que nos sentemos juntos. Entiendo que van a estar aquí pronto para que nos sentemos juntos.
Next, let's learn the imperatives. One of the most common ways to use this verb is to say, sit down. The informal singular version of that is siéntate. For example, sit down, let's talk.
Siéntate, hablemos.
The formal version is siéntese, which is the same as the subjunctive plus se. For example, sit down. We want you to listen to this.
Siéntese. Queremos que usted escuche esto.
And then if you're talking to a group of people, you'll say siéntense, which is the plural subjunctive plus se. For example, please sit down, children.
Por favor, siéntense, niños.
So all of these imperatives, siéntate, siéntese, and siéntense, are contractions. In general, with a pronominal verb like sentarse, contractions involving reflexives are very common. In fact, the infinitive very often gets contracted with reflexives. The forms sentarse, sentarme, sentarte, and sentarnos are all in common use. For example, we came here to sit down.
Vinimos aquí para sentarnos.
You worked a lot before sitting down.
Trabajaste mucho antes de sentarte.
Let's practice the imperatives and these contractions. In this one, the speaker is masculine. Sit down. I can sit alone.
Siéntate, yo puedo sentarme solo. Siéntate, yo puedo sentarme solo.
In this one, you're talking to a group of people. Sit down. It's already time for us to sit down.
Siéntese, ya es hora de sentarnos. Siéntese, ya es hora de sentarnos.
We felt that you didn't want to sit with us.
Sentimos que no querías sentarte con nosotros. Sentimos que no querías sentarte con nosotros.
In this one, use a formal voice. Sit down. You know we have to talk.
Siéntese, usted sabe que tenemos que hablar. Siéntese, usted sabe que tenemos que hablar.
Please sit down. I'm sleepy and I don't want to go anywhere.
Por favor, siéntate. Tengo sueño y no quiero ir a ningún lugar. Por favor, siéntate. Tengo sueño y no quiero ir a ningún lugar.
I don't want you to feel like he doesn't want to sit with you.
No quiero que sientas que él no quiere sentarse contigo. No quiero que sientas que él no quiere sentarse contigo.
For more practice with all of this, feel free to dig deeper at lcspodcast.com/147. Or if you're ready, let's go on to today's final quiz. We always sit down at the same time, but today we sat down later.
Siempre nos sentamos a la misma hora, pero hoy nos sentamos más tarde. Siempre nos sentamos a la misma hora, pero hoy nos sentamos más tarde.
She is in need of knowing that 3 times 3 equals 9.
Le hace falta saber que 3 por 3 es igual a 9. Le hace falta saber que 3 por 3 es igual a 9.
I sat where she sat.
Me senté donde ella se sentó. Me senté donde ella se sentó.
We want him to feel that he can talk with his 14 friends.
Queremos que sienta que puede hablar con sus 14 amigos. Queremos que sienta que puede hablar con sus 14 amigos.
Do you understand that I felt like he's in need of something?
¿Entiendes que yo sentí que le hace falta algo? ¿Entiendes que yo sentí que le hace falta algo?
I'm sorry. I know you felt bad because of what I did.
Lo siento, sé que te sentiste mal por lo que hice. Lo siento, sé que te sentiste mal por lo que hice.
I would like to feel like I'm not sleepy, but it's not like that.
Me gustaría sentir que no tengo sueño, pero no es así. Me gustaría sentir que no tengo sueño, pero no es así.
How do you want me to feel like it's not an order?
¿Cómo quieres que no sienta que es una orden? ¿Cómo quieres que no sienta que es una orden?
They have felt the same thing that I feel.
Han sentido lo mismo que yo siento. Han sentido lo mismo que yo siento.
She thinks it's a curse because he died at 12 o'clock.
Ella cree que es una maldición porque él murió a las 12 en punto. Ella cree que es una maldición porque él murió a las 12 en punto.
I felt like he didn't want to be with me. He always sits far away.
Sentía que no quería estar conmigo, siempre se sienta lejos. Sentía que no quería estar conmigo, siempre se sienta lejos.
Why do you say that you feel like you're going to die?
¿Por qué dices que sientes que vas a morir? ¿Por qué dices que sientes que vas a morir?
We felt what she said she was feeling.
Sentimos lo que ella dijo que sentía. Sentimos lo que ella dijo que sentía.
Do you seat the kids where their parents seat them?
¿Sientas a los chicos donde sus padres los sientan? ¿Sientas a los chicos donde sus padres los sientan?
She feels like she doesn't understand what you're saying.
Ella siente que no entiende lo que dices. Ella siente que no entiende lo que dices.
You sat down far from where they sat down.
Te sentaste lejos de donde ellos se sentaron. Te sentaste lejos de donde ellos se sentaron.
In this one, use a formal voice. Sit down. You know you have to sit down.
Siéntese. Usted sabe que tiene que sentarse. Siéntese. Usted sabe que tiene que sentarse.
I want us to sit together and for them to sit far away.
Quiero que nos sentemos juntos y que ellos se sienten lejos. Quiero que nos sentemos juntos y que ellos se sienten lejos.
In this one, you're talking to a group of people. Sit down now. I'm going to sit down later.
Siéntense ahora. Yo voy a sentarme más tarde. Siéntense ahora. Yo voy a sentarme más tarde.
We're going to sit down where you want to sit down.
Vamos a sentarnos donde tú quieres sentarte. Vamos a sentarnos donde tú quieres sentarte.
We have seated the children a few hours ago, and they're still sitting there.
Hemos sentado a los niños hace unas horas y todavía están sentados ahí. Hemos sentado a los niños hace unas horas y todavía están sentados ahí.
I want her to sit where I sit.
Quiero que ella se siente donde yo me siento. Quiero que ella se siente donde yo me siento.
Sit down. Why are you there if you know I want you to sit down?
Siéntate. ¿Por qué estás ahí si sabes que quiero que te sientes? Siéntate. ¿Por qué estás ahí si sabes que quiero que te sientes?
The boy likes to sit far from everyone.
Al chico le gusta sentarse lejos de todos. Al chico le gusta sentarse lejos de todos.
For more practice with all of this, go to lcspodcast.com/147. In tomorrow's episode, we'll learn some new adjectives that describe which of something you're talking about, including the words for left and right. This show is brought to you by LearnCraftSpanish.com. The Spanish voice in this episode was our coach Michael Agudelo. Our music was performed by the Seattle Marimba Quartet, and I'm Timothy, encouraging you to do the hard work of learning Spanish. Acquiring a second language is one of the most fulfilling things you can do, so start your fluency journey today at lcspodcast.com.